YouTube can be an amazing or incredibly distracting classroom resource. Today, I'm going to help you review your YouTube policy settings in the Google Admin Console. Welcome, Chromies. This is the Chromebook Classroom Podcast with John Sowash. On the show, we're going to explore the use of Chromebooks and web-based tools in the K-12 classroom. We'll get into the teaching ideas in just a moment, but first, a quick shout out to my sponsors. Registration for the January edition of the Google Certification Academy will open soon. Make becoming a Google Certified Educator one of your New Year's resolutions. Head over to geducator.com to add your name to the waiting list.
And now, let's start the show.
Welcome in, Chromies. Today we're going to be doing a deep dive into the YouTube settings within the Google Admin Console. My goal is once a month, I try to produce an episode specifically for IT administrators and anyone who is on the management IT side of Chromebooks and Google Workspace. There is just so much inside of the admin console. I know it's a lot to wrap your head around, and you've got all kinds of other things to deal with as well. So my goal is I want to bring you some specific tips, strategies, and an overview of various elements of the admin console to hopefully make your life easier and help you more effectively manage your users and devices. I have the privilege of this year I'm working with 3 different organizations as the Google Admin Consultant, 2 school districts and 1 business. And in some cases, I fully manage their Google Workspace domain. So I create users, set up their policies, basically just do whatever they need done so they can focus on other things. And in some instances, I'm more of a resource where I'll meet weekly or every other week with the IT department, and we just have a list of issues and we knock them off as best we can. YouTube has been something that I've been working a lot on for the last 2 or 3 weeks. I've got a school district in northern Michigan. Shout out to John and Steve, who has been struggling with some YouTube issues. Teachers are not able to access the videos that they need to, and students haven't been able to watch them through Google Classroom. And so I was just kind of wrapping my head around all the elements of the admin console. So I've done a lot of testing, and I think I've finally figured it out, and I'm going to share my notes with you here today. This all kind of starts many years ago. Google has always been trying to figure out a way to give school districts the good parts of YouTube and eliminate the problematic and distracting elements of YouTube. And they have tried 3 or 4 different solutions with varying degrees of success. And they've recently, as of September, launched a variation as well. So when I explain it, hopefully this will make a lot of sense. So you may remember in September, Google instituted this new age-based setting. I did a whole podcast episode on it. Essentially now you need to designate every organizational unit in your domain as containing users who are over the age of 18 or under the age of 18. And that selection sets off a whole long list of related policies that take effect. The default setting, Google assumes that everybody is under the age of 18 unless you go in and specify otherwise. And this relates very, very closely to YouTube. YouTube is actually one of the major things that is changed by that age designation. If an organizational unit contains users under the age of 18, by default, they will not be able to upload videos. They will not be able to create a YouTube channel, and they will no longer see comments and targeted advertisements inside of YouTube. So that's kind of like the kid YouTube experience. Now, in general, That's great. I have no problem with any of those things. In fact, prior to all of this, I would help school districts adjust their YouTube settings to enable most of those things. Well, that all now happens by default. So when a student goes to YouTube, they can go to YouTube, they can view videos, but they won't see comments. They can't create a channel. They can't upload videos. Now, this is a bit of a problem for teachers because there are some teachers who are creating YouTube videos and uploading them to YouTube. And if you don't go and specify their organizational unit as being for users above the age of 18, they will lose access to their YouTube channel. They will no longer be able to access any of their existing videos and won't be able to upload any new ones. And a lot of teachers have freaked out because they have hundreds of videos created over the course of many, many years. So tip number one is make sure, if you have not done so, that you review the age-based access settings for your various organizational units. This can be done, again, inside of the admin console. There is, right on the home page, a little app or icon called Account Settings, little briefcase icon. If you open that up and then go all the way to the very bottom, you will see the age-based access settings. And there's just two buttons, under 18, over 18. This does cascade down, or it is inheritable. So, I have an OU for students, I have an OU for staff, and I just go in and designate those top level OUs appropriately, and then all the child OUs inherit that as well. So if you want teachers to be able to upload videos and create a channel, you need to make sure that they are designated as over the age of 18. That's tip number one. Now, within the YouTube settings themselves, there are several additional features that govern what type of videos your students can look at. As we all have experienced, YouTube is full of wonderful educational content and also problematic, distracting, and inappropriate content, depending on the context. And so as much as we can, we want to block the bad stuff and allow in the good stuff. Now, prior to these age policies, I had advised IT administrators to disable the YouTube service for students. So again, from the admin console, you're going to go to the apps section. Then you're going to go to additional Google services. This lists a whole bunch of things, and then YouTube is one of them. Now, again, previously for the student OU, I would say disable YouTube. That didn't prevent students from going to youtube.com. It just prevented them from creating a channel. That is no longer the case. We just talked about that. If you disable the YouTube service inside of the additional Google services section, students will no longer be able to access youtube.com. When you do, it just says, sorry, you're not authorized to use this service. Now, this might be what you want. If you do not wish for students to go to YouTube and find videos and watch ESPN Top 10 or the latest beauty channel makeup tutorial, then you can just turn off the YouTube service. And some of you have done that in the past. Now, this is an interesting change that Google has made. If you turn off YouTube, students can't go to youtube.com. However, teachers can post YouTube videos in Google Slides and Google Classroom, and they will be visible to students. Students can't go to YouTube, but YouTube can come to them. And this allows teachers to select the videos they wish students to access and then watch them again within Google Slides or Google Classroom. All the links in those videos, typically there's a little YouTube icon. You click on that and it actually takes you to that channel. That won't work anymore. So if you are looking for a highly restricted YouTube experience where students really can only watch the content selected by the teachers, disable the YouTube service for your student OU. Make sure you leave it on for your teacher OU. So that's option 1. Okay. And look, I work with lots of different school districts and types of school districts. I'm not here to weigh in on which of these policies is better or worse. It really comes down to your school environment, culture, expectations of parents. I work with very, very conservative parochial school districts and then very large public school districts. So I've seen all of these policies in play, and they can all work depending on a lot of other factors. Now, if you do want to provide your students with some access to YouTube, that is an option. So first, you'll want to make sure that you enable the YouTube service. So again, additional Google services, make sure that it's on. Then you're going to click on the YouTube icon through the admin console, and that will open up an additional layer of settings. The first thing you're going to want to do is right at the top, it'll say content settings. And there's a very important button that says signed in users can only watch restricted and approved videos. This is kind of like the master switch for everything we're going to talk about from this point forward. If you don't check that box, nothing happens. And I learned this the hard way because I had spent like 30 minutes going in here and changing all these settings and moving users around, and nothing that I did seemed to be working. I would change a setting and everything would be exactly the same. This is the master switch. So again, under YouTube setup, you're looking for it. So there's a little checkbox, signed in users can only watch restricted and approved videos. You check that and you're good to go. Now, what does that mean? Restricted? Well, that's what comes next. I'm going to go back to the general YouTube settings, and then we have the permissions. So Google has provided essentially 3 different filter options for YouTube: strict, moderate, and unrestricted. Those are your 3 choices. Now, explaining exactly what that means is challenging. Now, in the admin console, when you look at these, it says that strict YouTube access says generally aligns with content ratings for viewers 9+. Okay. So any video that is rated 13 and up would not be visible. Moderate is rated for users 13 and up. And then unrestricted is anything up to age 18. So you still won't be able to watch content that's labeled 18 and older. Okay, so for students, anything that's either sexually explicit or violent, marked as 18+, no matter what setting you select, won't be visible. So those are your 3 options. The challenge is trying to understand where those video labels are and how do you know which video, what is the age restriction of a video? I have not been able to find that. So when you go to a video, you look at the description, you look at the different tags for that video. Nowhere on it does it say this video is approved for viewers 9+, 13+, 18. It doesn't say that. Now, on my YouTube channel, when I upload a video, I do have to designate various age designations. Like I see there's a checkbox 18+. Like I can go in there and mark this for kids, but it doesn't display that information for a viewer. So it's a bit of a challenge. Based on my testing, if you use this strict YouTube filter, that's the 9+, you're getting access, I'm just kind of estimating, to about 75% of YouTube. If you're doing moderate YouTube access, it's about 85 to 90%. And then unrestricted is, 95%. Only the, most sensitive content will be blocked. So these content restrictions, they give you these 3 levels. To be very honest, they don't make a huge difference, in my opinion. I've played around with all 3 of them. If it were my school district, I would probably go towards the moderate restriction. I probably wouldn't do the strict setting, and I probably, I'm not going to do unrestricted. I would go for the middle. That's just me. I was I just tested a few videos. I found a video from the History Channel on the Roman Empire. I think it's got some blood and gore from, Roman army kind of stuff. That one was labeled 18 plus. Again, there's content out there that you still may want students to have access to. It may still be educational despite the label. So again, we're walking through here the different options. Option one, which we discussed, is just turn off YouTube. Students can't get any YouTube videos other than the ones that teachers give them through Google Classroom. Option two is to allow students to go to YouTube, but curate their experience by either filtering it with strict, moderate, or quote unquote unrestricted filtering access. Okay. Now there is a solution to the issue that I just described, where a history teacher found this video on the Roman Empire. It's labeled as 18 plus, but they want to show it. Well, based on my moderate restriction, students can't access it. And it doesn't matter if they put it through Google Classroom, just give them, they can't get to it anyway. The third thing that you can do is allow teachers and staff members to approve videos that fall outside of your restriction level. And so while that Roman Empire video might be marked as 18 plus, I'm able to give that history teacher the ability to approve that. And there are two ways that you can grant that approval power to users. Now, if you remember, several years ago, Google instituted this classroom teacher Google group. And it does several different things, but adding a user account to this Google group, one of the things they get is the ability to approve YouTube videos. So inside of the YouTube settings, right where we were earlier, the content settings, we checked that box that said signed in users can only watch restricted videos. Just below that, there is an option for special approvers. And it says verified Google Classroom teachers can approve videos. So the first way that you can grant teachers the ability to approve videos is by turning on the special approval feature and then making sure that your teaching staff are all members of that classroom teacher Google group. They probably are. For Google Classroom to function the way it should, you should be using that group anyway. So it's a pretty easy thing. You probably already have that set up. You just got to check that box. Now, the second option that you can give people this approval permission is under the permissions that we just talked about. So we talked about strict, moderate, unrestricted. There's actually a fourth one that I didn't mention at the time, which is can approve. And this allows you to select an organizational unit, and anybody in that organizational unit is, again, allowed to approve those YouTube videos. I think the reason that Google provided these two methods is to give you the power to give this approval authority to non-instructional staff. So you may not want or need to add your principals, guidance counselors, people like that to the classroom teacher group. You may not want to. And so this allows you to just designate your staff, OU, as approvers. And you can do both. This isn't a, either or. You can do both of them. And anybody who falls into one of those two categories will receive that approval permission. Now, how does it work? It's pretty straightforward and pretty nice. A teacher can go to YouTube. Again, they have full access to YouTube. They can browse all content. When they open a video, just underneath the video, there will be a label, and it will say, this video is or is not approved for your domain. And then if you go all the way to the right side of the video, there is a button that says approve. I have tested this many times, and that approval process is pretty much instant. So if a teacher assigns a video, and again, it can be through Google Classroom, they can just give the link to the students. It can be in a Google slide presentation, however they distribute it. If that video is not approved, the students are going to get a message that says video not approved, not a big deal. The teacher can just open that video up, click that approve button, students refresh the page, and they're off and running. There's no approval process that they have to go through. You don't have to check it, better or worse. It's instant. Now, through the admin console, it is possible for you to look at the videos that have been approved. If you're just curious, from the YouTube settings page, right under the special approvers section, it says approved videos. And this actually takes you to a list of all the videos that have been approved previously. One very important note that I need to make. The classroom, it's very important that the classroom teacher Google group that I just mentioned is clean. Depending on your previous settings, it is very possible that there may be a few students in that group. That will not take long for word to get around that so-and-so has the approve button, and people will just say, can you approve this one? Can you approve this one? And they could go in there and do that. So I would recommend go into your classroom teacher group, make sure that's a good list, take out any old staff members, student accounts that can slip in there. It's not unheard of, so that this system will work for you. Those are the big things with the YouTube permissions. Again, you want to decide what level of access do you want to give your students. Do you want them to go to YouTube? You want to filter their YouTube experience. Who on your staff or employee list do you wish to create YouTube channels, upload content, and approve videos? Those are your big decisions, and hopefully this overview will help you understand those policies and apply them appropriately for your situation. I hope this was easy to follow along with, verbally. I am working on a detailed blog post and eventually a video that will show you the visuals of all these settings and some demos of what happens if you do this or you do that. I will link to some of the resources that Google has provided in the show notes for this episode. So if you just head over to my website, chrmbook.com/podcast, look for this episode, and I'll put as many links as I have to the different policies and instructions for how to set things up. You have to be a little bit careful about what digital resources, what blog posts you're referencing when you're researching this, because Google has changed their policies and the configuration quite a few times over the last 5 years. So if it's not an up-to-date resource, you may be getting some inaccurate information. I'd love to know if these admin-focused sessions are helpful. Send me a tweet or leave me a comment on this blog post and let me know if you liked more of these sessions like this. And if you have any specific admin, more technical topics that you'd like me to dive into, like this one on YouTube, always happy to hear your requests and do my best. I enjoy doing the research for these and then sharing my findings. Thanks for hanging out with me. Have a great rest of your day. I will see you next time. All the links from this episode are available at chrmbook.com/podcast. Are you one of my chromies? Send me a tweet, leave a review on Apple Podcast, or send me an email and let me know if you enjoyed this episode. You may even get a shout out at the end of a future episode. That's all for now. See you next time.